I think within the frame of communities are a tricky thing because they involve people, emotions, ideals, lifestyle, all of these things wrapped up. And perhaps I can share a bit about how I've gone about building communities as a technologist, right,
Sure.
and as a designer, both from the lens of Kickstarter when we launched Kickstarter, as well as some work I've actually done prior and since as both an entrepreneur and a designer and a technologist. And there's a word that is typically not associated with community, generally associated with the art world, which is curation. So basically the selection of something. And I think it's important when thinking about a community is, what do you want that community to represent? How do you want that community to feel? What ideals do you want that community to exude? And as you start to identify what those characteristics are, I think it becomes a lot easier in selecting and inviting people in to be part of that community to start, right? So that's where the curation piece comes in. I'll give an example of that. So when we founded Kickstarter, as we were getting ready to launch the platform, which, arguably, jokingly, Kickstarter is nothing without community, right? You need a community of people that have ideas, that are looking for capital to fund those ideas. And so at least one part of that community are the people with the ideas and the projects. And one effort that we had done, which arguably was very innate for the three of us who founded the company, was that we just told people what we were working on and that we were effectively building this thing for them, or people like them and us. And so when it came time to launch, we just had a small roster of folks who we felt their projects were genuine and would represent Kickstarter well, like what our ambitions were for the platform. And off we went. Fast forward a number of years post Kickstarter, I'd been working on another project called Lost Arts, which started out as a physical space, right? So now we're talking about like physical manifestation of community, and the same trope was used, which was effectively inviting a mix of people that represent what you want that community to represent, or to represent the future community that you want. And then there's just this sort of sphere of influence that tends to happen, which is by virtue of the people that you've invited in, they start telling their friends, tell their friends, who see the activity that are happening. And so in come sort of second wave, third wave, fourth wave of people. I've had this deep-seated interest in culture as much as I've had this deep-seated interest in technology. And like many people, I like to make money, right? And so there's this really interesting tension that I have to own. But I really appreciate that tension. And that tension is really finding a balance between those things, creating an environment or a company or product that there's symbiosis, I guess, between the service that you're offering, right, or the product that you're offering to an audience of people, right, and that you are able to make money doing said thing, but not at the expense of the community. And I think that's the most critical part. There's a whole cohort of entrepreneurs, technologists, designers, philanthropists, nonprofit leaders who are also moving towards this direction and thinking this way. Right? Another example of that is Kickstarter becoming a public benefit corporation, which is again finding this balance between community and commerce. Right. Another example of a company of note that made that shift to a public benefit corporation is Patagonia. basically a company that sells shoes and clothing for camping. And the dichotomy there, I think, for them is that they are making products to get you out into nature. But by getting you out into nature, you're also destroying nature. And so there's this tension that they need to ride as well. And I know Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder, wrestles with that. I don't know him personally, but he wrestles with that issue because he is first a rock climber, mountain climber, right? An alpinist. And he is second, a business person, maybe third, fourth, I don't know. And so I think there's this very interesting movement going on as well, where a lot of people are trying to think about this symbiosis between commerce and community. We're in a very weird moment for so many people, including myself, frankly, around the future of work. There's this interesting tension in this moment where there's a whole cohort of the population, like the global population, that's like, when are we going to get back to the old normal? Never going to get there, right? It's gone, 100% gone. And the longer this thing sits with us, the more true that becomes. I think the piece that I'm excited about, and that I've always been excited about, and the torch that I've been holding probably since the 90s, is that you have the autonomy to live where you want to live and still do the work that you want to do. I think what's interesting maybe about this future of work moment, this accelerated moment, is that we're thrown into that environment way too quickly. And we're all ill prepared, even myself, who's been doing this for 2 decades more. And so what we need is the tools to catch up to the moment. And so there's this invisible race going on that most people don't see, of all the moles, meaning all the entrepreneurs and designers and technologists, right, underground, like in their basements, invisible, building things. And until they reveal what those things are, we're stuck with Zoom calls and things that were designed for a different context. So I'm actually super excited about the other side of it. As a designer, and I guess I have to say as an entrepreneur, technologist, and maybe just as somebody who is creative, right? And generally, unfortunately, an optimist. What I mean by that is it's tough to be an optimist right now because things are difficult, right? Things are impossible for some. But I do know this, is that every time there's hardship, there's always a brighter, sunnier day, right? And what we don't see right now is when that happens, right? We're in this kind of like purgatory moment. This moment is actually incredibly familiar to me because we launched Kickstarter in a very similar environment, right? We launched Kickstarter on April 28th of 2009, just coming out of that other global economic crisis spurred on by the housing crisis here in the United States. So, the thesis that I tend to live by, again, whether you want to apply this as Charles, the designer, or otherwise, is it's a moment where behavior is by force going to change. And that is incredibly interesting fodder to observe. And through that observation, plus a little hint of science fiction, right? You can start to pull these two things together and arguably create tools that get you to that future, right? And so maybe if I go back to the question around being a designer in this moment, I should define what kind of designer I am, right? Yes, I do some graphic design work. I'm an interaction designer. I'm also a systems designer, an information architect, right? Like these are all the kind of hats that I wear as a designer. But one tool that has always been very important and arguably valuable for me as a designer is observation, right? Which is a research kind of tool. And it's through observation, kind of watching people, right, engage with one another, or engage through devices or technology or vehicles, whatever. There is inspiration, and that inspiration is something's not working. I think there's a better way to do this thing that that person is trying to achieve, and the hammer that's in their hand is completely inappropriate. So my excitement for the other side is there's a bunch of people who are building new modern hammers, or the new nail, I guess. For a designer, it's exciting because there's just all these new problems to solve through a design lens, but all these new things to design, whether it's objects or experiences, what have you, right? Like if I were a fashion designer, I'd be excited because I get to design a face mask, right? That is functionally sound, but aesthetically has personality to it, which as humans, ever present, we want to reflect something about us in the clothing that we wear, the car that we drive, right? The coffee that we drink, right? Or the fact that we don't drink coffee, right? All of these things say something about us and express who we are. So, yeah. So I don't know. It is a very hard moment. It's a very dark moment, but I am confident that we're going to get on the other side of this, and what that world looks like. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm excited for whatever that unknown is.